Air pollution is our next main topic, and this is one that just kind of from my forum, I noticed a lot of people are actually kind of concerned about it. So let's talk about it and talk about some of the ways we can hopefully cut down on our emissions. So middle school Earth Science Standard 3-3 and 3-4, basically you're going to be able to define what air pollution is, both natural and synthetic. You'll also be able to define global warming, summarize what the greenhouse effect is, and one more that I can't see because right now my screen's over it, but yes, you'll be able to do it. So make sure you for sure have your whole group notes in front of you. Now, whole group is a little bit different today versus most other days. So for whole group, you are going to do this activity independently. I'll give you time in class, but you will click on the link that I provided you in Schoology, and it'll take you to a page that looks like this, your carbon footprint calculator. If you're not in class viewing this or walking through it with me, there is a how-to video that I have placed within the folder for you. Okay, so that. After you're done with that activity, remember your champ's expectations, and yeah, we'll move on if you're ready for the PowerPoint notes. So air pollution overall is a mixture of solid particles and gases within our air. So all of these can come from things like car emissions, chemicals from factories, dust, pollen, mold spores, just being suspended within the air, ash, things like that. Now, the major reason why air pollution is such a big deal is because it's actually ozone. So we know ozone as that layer up in the stratosphere that blocks out UV rays and helps protect us humans, but it also is super duper harmful at our tropospheric level. Because it's O3 versus O2, it forms this pollution, and then also creates smog, which is that fog, but that chemical nasty fog, like at our level. So ozone is great for protecting those radiation rays and things like that, but not great for us actually. So that. Now, when we say air pollution, we have to understand that there are two different types of air pollution. There are synthetic air pollutions, which are man-made and caused, and then there are natural air pollutions, things that just happen, such as dust is just a thing. It's here. There's no way to lessen or whatnot. Pollen from plant organisms, mold spores from fungi. When a volcano erupts, that releases pollutants into the air as well. Same with wildfires. Again, not necessarily human controlled, it's just what happens on our planet. So it's just kind of learning to live with those sorts of things, but how do we not contribute our own? Now, air pollution has a lot of possible effects on humans and our planet, such as acid rain or precipitation, smog, deterioration of fields, plant and animal extinctions, health problems for humans, global warming, and climate change. There's a lot that air pollution can do. Obviously, we need air and oxygen in our atmosphere in order to survive, because without taking in and out breaths, we wouldn't be able to live. So next to water pollution is very, very important, especially for human beings. So negative weather impacts. So on top of the fact that when we add to air pollution and other sorts of pollutions, we have these weird weather changes. Beyond just that, we also then have things such as acid rain. This is rainfall made significantly more acidic by atmospheric pollutions that it causes environmental harm. Typically, you see it with forests and lakes. The top picture is of a forest who experienced acid rain. As you can see, all the leaves on the trees are gone. And then the bark itself is burnt. things like that. If that sort of water were to run off or be added into a lake, you then have negative effects on the organisms that live within there. If it did it to a forest like this, goodness only knows how a lake could actually look. And then also another negative weather impact would include smog. So this is a mixture of smoke and fog within the air due to large amounts of coal being burned, mixing with smoke and sulfur dioxide and things like that. Um, the bottom picture is the same city, just a couple hours different. Smog typically affects early morning, late afternoon, sort of a thing when we're moving from night to day and day to night, things like that. If you lived in a larger city, or if you've ever watched the news on a larger city, they might give a smog report, things like that. But it's essentially this hazy fog, but it's hazy fog that if you were to breathe it in, you could cause significant damage to your respiratory, and especially your upper respiratory system. It could impact on many significant levels, including human health problems. Being exposed to high levels of air pollutants can cause a variety of adverse health effects, such as respiratory infection, heart disease, lung cancer, increased risk in any of these categories, things like that. It is really, really not good. If you already have breathing problems or heart problems, living in polluted air is just making it that much worse. So those are just how it can affect humans directly. Now, indirectly, we get things like global warming and the greenhouse effect. So this is the gradual increase in the overall temperature of Earth's atmosphere, generally attributed to greenhouse effect, causing an increased level of carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, and other pollutants. So essentially what happens is, if you look at this diagram, you can see that you have this layer. This is essentially the ozone layer, or any layer of our atmosphere, which its main responsibilities is when these rays come in, it keeps what it needs to in, but lets what it doesn't need out, keeping us at a steady temperature. Well, what happens is when we add more and more greenhouse gases into this layer, it's essentially allowing all these rays in, but not letting them out to where they end up bouncing off of each other around the entire world. Things like that. Same goes with long wavelength from outside heat sources and things like that. To where it's not able to escape back out into the universe, making it so that excess radiation increases the overall temperature of the planet. And yes, over time, the Earth has gone through many climate changing events, between being really, really warm during the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods, where we didn't have any polar ice caps to allow for that more equal heating of our Earth. So things like that, all the way to then shortly after that, we then get ice ages. We've had that, but the thing is that those tend to happen over extended periods of time, versus by adding more carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, things like that, pollutants into our air. We are just exponentially increasing that timeline, like, to shrink significantly. So instead of maybe having a couple million years before our next ice age is due, it might only be in a couple thousand years, just because we are adding all of this greenhouse gas, which eventually blocks out the sun, which means then that we're not getting heated up. And before that happens, we're letting in so much heat that we're essentially boiling ourselves to death. And then it sends us into an ice age to hopefully like do a hard reset on the whole like climate situation. But what that causes mass extinctions, and we are already like amongst the sixth mass extinction, but we don't ourselves want to be a part of that extinction process. At least I wouldn't. So That's global warming and greenhouse gases, like, or greenhouse effect in a really quick nutshell. Um, Environmental effects. So by adding more air pollution or contributing to the current air pollution situation, we are essentially deteriorating any sort of fields that we have when it comes to agriculture. Um, and that is because by adding more carbons to our carbon dioxide to our atmosphere, we're essentially suffocating any sort of plants. And you're like, well, gee, I did pay attention in seventh grade science, and plants need carbon dioxide to take in so that they can expel oxygen for us. Yes, but just as we are never exposed to 100% oxygen, plants can't be exposed to 100% carbon dioxide. Um, it's not how our systems work. So we're essentially then suffocating the plants with too much of what they need. But then potentially blocking out a lot of the sun to not allow photosynthesis to actually occur, or it's actually just too warm for our crops to do what they need to do. So that animals then maybe eating off different plants that weren't normally being eaten off beforehand because other crops and plants that they would normally eat are no longer readily available to them. Again, just this giant like chain domino effect sort of a thing. Plant and animal extinction also comes with this. By having it too warm for crops and animals to survive within current latitudes, you're then throwing animals toward heat exhaustion to where they just die from that, or dying from lack of nutrition because they don't have what foods they normally would need available to them. And then also just the fact that by changing our environment so quickly, it doesn't give organisms time to adapt. We know that adaptation can happen, but we have to give it time to happen. And if we are just like, oh, hey, here's a 5-degree increase, like within 100 years, that's not enough time for adaptation to occur. And the same goes for humans. So it's, again, just that really dramatic but accurate domino effect that would be happening. So at the beginning of this, you should have calculated your carbon footprint. Now, what is a carbon footprint? It's the amount of carbon dioxide or other carbon compounds that we are emitting due to consumption of fossil fuels, consumption of specific foods and things like that, how we choose to live our lives within our homes and things like that. So it's important to understand what your carbon footprint is, and then to also see how maybe you yourself could make some adjustments within your own personal life to hopefully lower your carbon footprint impact on the earth. Now, the thing is, and hopefully you've heard me say this enough, it's going to take more than just one of us to make a change to truly see any sort of a difference. But by you taking a step, it could then show others that it is really not that bad to take the step as well. The fact that I'm sitting in my office and I don't have my lights on, because why do I need my lights on when I can open my curtains and let the gorgeous sunlight come through? Things like that. The fact that you turn off the faucet while you're brushing your teeth, only when you like rinse and things like that do you turn it on, rather than letting it just run constantly. Things like that. So there are plenty of little things that one person can do, and if everybody does a couple little things, it does add up. There's over 7 billion people on this planet, and if all 7 billion of us do something, we're going to see the benefits. So, yep, make sure that you've completed your notes and that you have completed your exit slip. Thanks, guys.